Okay, so I think we are going to start. So we've got a large number of participants. So thank you so much, everybody that's joining this webinar, for coming to this important event and important week for us. So we're really grateful for you to be here. A couple of housekeeping things and basic principles. So due to the size of the group, this is going to be more of a seminar style approach to the session. We also are enabling quite a lot of time towards the end for a Q&A. So it is a little bit of me talking, I'm afraid, but there will be ample time for you to ask some questions and for us to respond. You will need to use the Q&A button, I'm afraid. The raising the hand will not work through this session. So please feel free to ensure that you either ask any questions that you want us to respond to, and my team are on hand to moderate some of that through the session. The other thing I'd like to say is we are going to be recording this session. We like to use this to share in other events, but we will make sure that we will remain confidentiality for you. So anybody that does ask a question, we will not respond with your name, just your answer. The final thing is we will have a period just midway through where there will be a very short polling, just 5 quick questions. If I could ask you to participate in that, that would be really helpful. So today is all about providing some tips for those that may be considering facilitating some internal sessions around safe space. I want to start by a little bit of an introduction to the team that's on the call today. So myself, partner and head of the DICE, or Diversity, Inclusion, Culture and Ethics practice, and also my colleague and senior consultant Ade is on hand as well. I will be delivering the majority of the session, but Ade will be helping me with any Q&A towards the end. So very briefly around our organisation, I hope many of you have heard of Green Park. We've had a fantastic name in the executive search space for many years, but more recently in the last 5 years, we created a diversity and inclusion consultancy practice where we've been instrumental in working with organisations across all diversity, but we've worked very heavily within the race agenda. And through that work, it's involved lots of interviewing and focus groups and analysing the culture of organisations. So some of what we're showing with you today is indeed directly from some of that work, but anonymised. So the first thing that we want to talk to you about is indeed what is REM. So REM, as you've probably read through some of our material, the non-profit community was founded by Green Park with a number of partners, as you can see. And I guess what led to the creation of REM was a number of events that happened in 2020, which no doubt you are all very familiar with. The sad death of George Floyd, following then the BLM movement, and also the impact in terms of inequalities that we see some ethnic minority communities faced through the COVID-19 pandemic. And so all of this, plus the fact that we've championed race for many years, pushed us towards the fact that we really needed to make some change in this space. So the concept of Race Equality Matters and Race Equality Week was created. And one of the core components of that was the creation of safe space. So for many years, we've been encouraging organisations that they must have some open dialogue with all colleagues in their organisation. They must feel more comfortable talking about race. It can be an uncomfortable subject, but it shouldn't be, and we can all work to make this more comfortable. So safe space is really about how do you facilitate that in a structured way, which is less about talking, but more about listening and actions. So we did a bit of research when we started to create this concept of REM, and we did actually speak to a number of individuals, a large number of organisations, a large number of individuals of different ethnic minority types. And there was a number of data points that we captured, and just a couple of them are shared here for you. So 85% of the people that we spoke to suggested that their leaders really didn't understand what ethnic minority colleagues wanted or needed. And that's firmly backed up by all of our audit work around the disproportionality that we see. 75% of race network chairs also suggested that some of the recent PR campaigns that was gestured, particularly after BLM, felt pretty meaningless and didn't really prompt for real action. So the point of safe space is to really start to address some of that and really start to get that conversation open. So there's a number of different ways to get some support around that. If you haven't already downloaded our Safe Space Guide, which is in 3 parts, you can get that from our website really easily. And I really hope that will give you a little bit more help than what we're covering today. Now, it's really important that you sort of make your own way in this space. You know, we don't want to be too prescribed around how you'd go about creating a safe space proposition, but we have given a bit of a framework here just to aid you. So we are suggesting that safe space should be around 2 hours. It should be in a really comfortable place, and we have heard some sessions being conducted in canteens and things like that. That's not what we would suggest. It should be in a safe and comfortable environment, and it should be a dialogue that's facilitated between 3 to 5 board members or leaders and up to around 10 ethnic minority colleagues. And we have suggested that it is split across these 3 distinct parts. So the first part is about informing and educating. And as we start to go through this session, you'll hear me mention fear quite a lot. And I personally coach quite a lot of leaders. They're predominantly white male leaders, and they have a real uncomfortableness and fearfulness around the topic of race. So part of this is ensuring that those leaders have a safe environment where they can ask questions that perhaps they wouldn't be comfortable doing so in a public environment. The second point in the framework is about understanding, and it's really important that all of those individuals involved in safe space have an opportunity to raise particular concerns or issues that they really want to have some actions put against. And the whole concept of safety is people will not make any judgment about that. And finally, and probably the most important part of the framework, is the action. The board have to agree that they will take some action on. There's a lot of fatigue in this space at the moment, that people are being asked a lot, but there's very little follow through. So it's really that the leadership involved will commit to some targets or commit to some monitoring of progress. So the role of the facilitator. Now, many of you that have signed up for this call may be even considering to be your facilitator yourself, or you might be identifying someone in the organisation. This is really a crucial role. It is the make or break of success of these kind of conversations, because you are the person in between that can manage this meeting well. It has to be constructive, it has to be safe, and it has to be fair. And you have to regulate behaviour. And sadly, when we get into these topics, they can be quite emotive. So you have to have quite a lot of empathy. So you might be looking for an internal member of staff, but ideally, if your resources permit, you might be looking for an external expert. And there is some benefits in having that impartial individual involved in these sessions. So as the list describes, I won't go through them all, but I'll just pick a few of them out. One of the key things is remaining objective. It's really important, particularly if you work in the organisation, you don't necessarily have a strong opinion either way about what's being raised. It is really important that you encourage fair participation. There's no point having 10 people and only having the voice of one in the room. So that's really key. And finally, it's really important that there isn't a defensiveness, or there isn't the opportunity for you to feel that that feedback is personal to you. You are not, as the facilitator, there to excuse the behaviour of anyone else or indeed issues with the organisation. So a little bit of what we're hearing. So I guess in recent events, and particularly in the last year, and particularly with the BLM movement being so prominent, it has really started to shine the spotlight onto organisations, and quite rightly and thankfully so, that they really need to respond. And that response isn't just some PR campaign, it's with real meaningful action, and the time is now to address that. So what are we hearing through some of our review work? There is a lot of confusion, and again, I say the word fear, in what terms are appropriate to use. And this is really the first start to have that dialogue and to get people to feel comfortable to engage with the subject of race. And this is an issue that's been going on for many, many years. Language is very personal. And whether we refer to the term or the acronym BAME, which, as many of you will know, stands for Black, Asian, Minority, Ethnic, sometimes shortened to BME, or person of colour or woman of colour, all these different terms are spoken about in society and in the workplace. And it's really important that you have the safe space to really explore what does language mean to the individuals in the room, and that really will help on both sides. There is some conversation around the topics at the moment of ethnic minority. As a female myself, I'm not majorly comfortable being considered a minority, and many people of different ethnicities are not comfortable with being called an ethnic minority. So there is some, again, some potential topics you can bring up to explore that. Through our insight work, when we think about this acronym, what does it really mean? Is it appropriate to encapsulate anybody and everybody that isn't considered to be white British into this term called BAME? And for many people who may be Black, Asian or not, they don't agree with this term. And I guess for me, doing the analysis work that I do, there is a lot of issues that can potentially be to bear when we do this categorization and grouping. And so what tends to happen is we diffuse or we dilute the specific challenges that face the B, the A and the ME. We also shield what's really going on in terms of representation. So we ask to see a lot of monitoring data, and sometimes the ethnic minority percentage might be 20%, but when we drill down, we look at the Black heritage representation, it can be as little as 3%. So is that acronym really showing what's going on in the organisation? The final area is around a lack of racial fluency. So with all the interviews we carry out, and there's been over 100 engagements in different organisations, many people of colour will say their leaders and their managers simply just do not have the tools to have a conversation and to be fluent around the topic of race. Also, sadly for us, we get involved in quite a lot of analysis, and we look at differences in experiences and differences in processes. And we sadly do see quite a lot of disproportionality, particularly if you happen to be from a Black or Asian heritage background. Now, that's not across every organisation, but it is across many. And many organisations are proactively trying to change this, but this is the situation as it stands currently. We know that there is a huge amount of underrepresentation by people of colour in organisations across all tiers, but predominantly in leadership. We know that there is differences in experiences across recruitment journey, in opportunities, and also at the rate of promotion and progression. And through our audit work, we really start to identify that out. And the final thing is, organisations have come under a lot of challenge around their BLM response. Is it comms? Is it action? Was the speed of response quick enough? Did they decide to make no response? How was that received by employees and maybe customers if you are in a service industry? So these are the things that we're hearing, which leads me nicely on to thinking about some topics that you could cover through your facilitated safe space. Now, again, this is not prescribed, this is just some topics for you to consider. So we've already started to think about racial terminology, and I really think this is the first step to getting people to be more comfortable with having conversations more regularly. There's also the need to understand experiences, and we talk a lot about insider-outsider dynamics and how certain individuals or groups can feel that they are on the outside and how that then can manifest into exclusion. So understanding through safe space people's experiences can really help for you to ensure a more inclusive workplace. There's also a great deal of perception around fairness or unfairness in processes. So to get, again, a little bit more information and meat on bones around what processes people perceive that unfairness is really important for you to take some action. The role of allyship, being an ally, and I like to call myself an ally. I know many leaders that are doing some great stuff in this space and many that are not, and many that have the potential to do more. But this is about being a role model, irrespective of your diversity, standing side by a different community, mentoring, sponsoring, really taking on that role to champion and support. And so I think to understand from the people in the safe space what they're looking for from an ally would give you some really good information. We know that in some organisations there is no or low visible senior role models. And actually we talk about lack of role models a lot, but we don't really understand the impact that that truly has. When you join an organisation and you look up and you see people that do not look like you. So to really understand from a safe space conversation the impacts that that has on people, their aspirations and their thoughts and feelings of the organisation is, again, really empowering. I think the group should be there to be solution focused. So getting the group collectively to think about organisational improvements. What do they believe would improve inclusion across the organisation? And finally, we talk about behaviours, microaggressions, bias, we talk about racism. Nobody wants to be called a racist. No organisation wants to be tagged as having any racist behaviours within it. And so there's an awful lot of defensiveness, and sometimes it's easier not to go there, and we see that quite a lot. So actually what we need to do is evidence, how does this show up in the workplace? How does it play out? What examples can we collect from safe space of people that are willing to share, anonymised or not, that show how microaggressions or bias really looks and feels for them? And I know through the work that I do, by replaying that back confidentially to leaders of how it makes people feel, it really starts to get them to sit up and think about their behaviour specifically. So there are some, I guess, top tips, and obviously this deck can be shared with you after this. So feel free to, use some of this after. But I guess, again, I don't want to go through the whole list, but just want to pick up on a couple of things. So for any facilitators that are on this call or people you're planning to have, it is about the role that they can have in making this topic more comfortable. And the psychological safety has been highlighted there for a reason. And we hear this concept or this term a lot, and it is so, so important. It's important for a variety of reasons. People don't want reprisals for speaking out. People want to know they're safe to share their experience, their diversity, data, whatever it might be. And they have to know that that's going to be okay for them to do so. So that commitment to psychological safety is really important. Trust is also really important. It may be that in the first safe space session, you don't build that trust completely, and maybe you need to evidence that trust over a period of time. And finally, I wouldn't overpromise. Again, getting back to the point that we often we're going to do things and don't always follow through. Offer support, but do not promise or overpromise. So on summary there are key things that you need to do. You need to listen, you need to reflect, do not make judgment, but more importantly is about taking the action. Okay, so for me, I'm just showing you this slide because it may be something that you might want to consider as a bit of a follow-on from your safe space sessions, or even bring it up through the safe space sessions. So for me, part of the issue that has prevented the race agenda from really moving forward is it does come from a person's particular frame of reference, their backstory, their experience, the level to which they've engaged with diverse communities in their social circle, in their growing up circle, or in their previous work circle. And we see that through working in really diverse organisations and not very diverse organisations. So you build a frame of reference. And sadly, that frame of reference, if you're not competent or curious of the subject of race, can be backfilled by fear. And then what happens, which is even more concerning, is that fear means that it builds disengagement. So as a leader, I'm too scared to talk about it, so I'll pull myself back completely from the conversation around race, or even people that are different to me. Now, today's workplaces are more multicultural than ever, and it is very normal now in most organisations to work with people from many different cultural backgrounds. So for us at Green Park, there was a need for a real solution, a different solution. And so we've gone through the training on this topic ourselves, and we really think this might be something that you might want to consider for some of your colleagues as well. And this is stuff that you can do yourself. This isn't stuff you need to get external support on. Cultural intelligence, or CQ, is a bit of a game changer for me. Those of you that don't know about this, you'll know about IQ. You'll also probably be fully aware of EQ, emotional intelligence, and how we measure leaders and their behaviours on emotional intelligence. CQ is a really fantastic complementary component that slots right in there with the other two. And it's really about ensuring that people that have got fears around having conversations and really moving the dial are taking on a journey where they're much more interested and curious to learn about difference. They don't see their culture as being superior. And part of that is the drive. The second part is they're willing to build their knowledge. So particularly when we safe space, it is a knowledge building exercise. It's about understanding how different cultures work individually and together. The third area is about a strategy. What's our plan? And that's exactly what needs to happen after safe space. And finally, action is about displaying that through behaviours. So I've showed you this slide because it is a particular learning strategy and development tool, but it's the sort of mindset that I think facilitators and leaders should be getting into before they embark into a safe space conversation. Okay. Final slide before we're going to go to a bit of a poll and also open up for some Q&A. So unfortunately, the reason why we're here and the fact that things haven't moved on the way we would like them to is because there are a number of barriers that get in the way, and there is some harsh realities which are sadly the truth. And so again, not wanting to go through the whole list, but I'll pick a few. For many years, the onus has often been placed on the Black person or the person of colour to be the expert and to drive change and to identify all the things that need to change in an organisation. But actually, it's not the role of that individual, it's a collective role. And it's really important that all people in an organisation, and particularly the majority, take some of the responsibility to ensure that there is some anti-racism principles in place and that they're really thinking about engagement more broadly and they have that racial fluency. There's a couple of points I'm going to pick up from here, and I guess one that has been very topical over the last few months is this concept of all lives matter. That term is incredibly unhelpful to the agenda of Black Lives Matter, and I don't think anyone would disagree with the fact that all lives do matter. But sadly, there is a real disproportionate effect on some diverse groups, which means there is a need for more action, more effort. And so if we just talk about all lives matter, and that is our mantra, it can diminish the importance of the groups that might need support the most. And then I guess, let me pick a couple of more lenses. Okay, so the other one I'll pick up on is white privilege. So white privilege is something that's spoken about quite a lot, and indeed privilege itself is spoken about quite a lot. And it is seen that we really don't look at privilege through the lens of a person of colour. And for me, I've done a lot of work on privilege. And for me, I don't think anyone should be ashamed of their privilege. It's not something that people have to apologise about. But it does mean that you have to use your privilege to help and advance others. And I describe it a little bit like having keys. And some people are given more keys than others. And that doesn't mean to say you haven't worked incredibly hard to get those keys, but your journey and navigation, particularly in the workplace, has been somewhat different. So how can I, if I have privilege, give those keys, offer those keys to other people and really help navigate their journey and share some of that privilege that I might have and I might have experienced. So I'm going to shut the presentation down for a short moment. I'm going to hand over to my colleague who's going to do a very short poll with you, if that's okay. It's just 5 questions. And I'm just going to have a quick look through your questions before I answer some of those for you. Okay, I think we should have all completed the poll now. And we are getting some results. So let's just have a look at these results. So the first question was, how comfortable do you feel in facilitating safe space conversations? Looks like majority there is fairly comfortable, 61%. There are some that are not. So happily answer any questions that you might have about your uncomfortableness to see if we can help you with that. Question 2, do you feel leaders and managers are confident in speaking about race? Well, that's quite clear. 79% vote not at all. And I would agree with that completely. Again, any questions you want to put forward around that, let's hope we can answer them for you. Do your leaders and managers have an understanding of cultural difference? So somewhat. Okay. So again, offering out some questions for you guys might be around, in what areas do you think they're strong around cultural difference understanding, and what areas do you think they might be weak? That might be a potential question if anyone wants to know. Has your organisation undertaken internal training on cultural intelligence, leadership, or racial fluency? Oh, I've just lost my poll. Hang on a sec. I don't know what the answers. Oh, I'm back. Thank you. Bear with me. Let me just scroll down. So in terms of training undertaken, I think majority are saying no. Again, happy to answer the questions you might have on the types of training that you might need to be looking for. Do you feel like you require any further support on this? 81% said yes. So you know, hopefully we're here to help both now and after. So I would say I'm going to go through some of your Q&As now, but we have got a short, sharp 45-minute session. We are here to assist and we are providing some details afterwards in terms of some links that you can get in contact with myself or the team. So let me pull up some questions and I'm hoping you can all still hear me okay. So one of the questions I have, and I just want to make sure I understand the question first, is just wondered what the panel's view is on whether allyship should be generic, e.g. EDI, or protected characteristics specific. Oh, okay. So I think what this individual means by the question is, should we have like a race ally, an LGBT ally, or should it be more of an inclusion ally? I'll perhaps give my view and then perhaps have Ade to share her view, if that's okay. So for my view, I think it's very much both. So from a role model perspective, when we look at the most senior people in an organisation, they're typically not the most diverse. So you're not seeing the diversity in terms of role model, but you can see inclusive role models. So I think any leader has the opportunity to have a different way and style of being more inclusive in their behaviour. So in essence, that would be the generic approach, I guess, more broadly an inclusion ally. But however, I do think it's really important that there's an ally per strand. And the way you often see that manifest is via employee resource groups, where they may well have a straight ally or a white ally or whatever it might be. And that person is typically quite senior. So they take a bit of an executive sponsorship role on, and it's quite a good education piece for both parties as well. So that would be my answer to the question. Maybe hand over to Ade for her response to that.
Yeah, thanks a lot for that, Jo. What I would say when it comes to allyship, I would recommend just be really inclusive. For example, you could be in a meeting, or you may want to bring somebody from a BAME background to the meeting and just let them have a voice at the table. So you're showing them that you want to be really inclusive, and that's a really good example of allyship. It doesn't just have to be someone from the top who is, you know, promoting this. You yourself, if you're just, you know, not a regular colleague, if you're not of leadership, or if you are in leadership, be purposeful to include those voices at the table. And that's a great example of allyship.
Thanks, Ade. And yeah, and I guess the point I perhaps need to clarify is this doesn't need to be a formal relationship. There are lots of kind of formal mechanisms where organisations are creating allyship programs or sponsorship and mentoring, reverse mentoring. I mean, they're great because they have some structure, which means there can be some tracking on the success of them. But equally, there's lots of informal allyship relationships like Ade has described there, which organisations are creating, particularly if you're a smaller business. And I know we have some smaller businesses on the call today. So thank you for that. Hopefully that answered your question. The other question that we've got a couple of a similar theme is, how does the facilitator best get to the actions or commitment stage to act? And I think that's a really good question to raise. And so it is about getting some of those commitments nailed in the room, but it's also about the follow through. So to kind of explain what I mean by that, you're trying to do a lot of things in that safe space. You're trying to provide a lot of opportunity for people to share, and some of that can be quite emotive. And then you're trying to move the conversation on to make it solution focused, but with a balance that you don't want to you know, not listen to people's concerns. And I think that's quite a difficult facilitation skill. And so whilst you can start the conversation about actions, you really want it to to sort of start quite organically. So just get people to share, you know, what's going to improve your experience, you know, anything. Just start going, you know, lots and lots and lots of different ideas. And I think that starts to really get the conversation going. The key then is what you do with that afterwards. And that's about getting those leaders to really say, okay, how are we going to prioritize? You know, we've got all of these actions that have been identified and potential things that people would like to see. Some of those can be adopted straight away. Some of them might be longer term. So how can you work with the leadership to help get them to prioritize and to commit, and then to go back to the group and tell them these are the things that we are going to take forward, and explain to them any of the things that they don't think they can take forward, because I think it's really important people don't feel shut down by their views as well. So that's the way that I would do it within a safe space. I'm just having a look at the other question. How do you suggest to start getting senior leadership buy-in into safe space? Yeah, really good question. I find at the moment that there has been a real sea change. And I don't know whether this comes from the right reasons or the wrong reasons, and maybe I'll explain what I mean by that. So whether leaders now are wanting to understand more about this because there's a lot more scrutiny and pressure, or whether they're finally understanding that this makes a better workplace, I don't know the answer to that. There's a mix, but actually they are listening more, and they're knowing that they need to do more. And actually many of them will have it on their board agenda. Many of them will be wanting to have some kind of objectives around this, but they just don't have the tools to engage. So I've got a number of clients at the moment that have got D&I objectives in their leadership scorecard, but they're not doing anything with them. They're not moving the agenda on because they simply don't know what to do. So one of the things that we've been talking about with them is how can we actually really bring them together and get them into a group environment where they feel that they can get those tools. And one of the best ways of doing that is listening sessions, whether you call it a safe space or not. And I found that as long as you set the rules and the boundaries, that there is no judgment, there's no right or wrong questions or answers raised, you feel safe, there's, you know, to go in and just free flow, and there is boundaries around this conversation, leaders feel really comfortable doing that, perhaps more comfortable than going out publicly. Another thing that I think helps with buying is leaders are being challenged by stakeholders, by consumers, by customers, by their own employees at open events. And actually they just don't know what to say. So it's in their interest, particularly if they have to talk externally, that they use these safe spaces to educate. So I think that helps with buying. Ade, have you got anything to add to that at all?
Yeah, I would like to, thanks. I really like this question. What I wanted to say is I think it's really important as well that you ask your colleagues of diverse ethnic groups to also be open to educate. It's not just that they should be willing to just receive, but they should also be open to educate. So for example, if you may have, you know, some people don't know how to use the terminology Black person, for example, they may feel a bit uncomfortable using that terminology. There's actually nothing wrong with that terminology, but obviously if leaders don't know this, if they're not asking these questions, sometimes they shy away, they don't quite know how to address their colleagues. So I would just suggest that, you know, make it clear to your colleagues to be open to educate with just knowing that if they educate their leaders, they will get something back. It's really in the education piece, I'd say.
Yeah. Thank you, Ade. Another question we have, or more of a point, is, are there any resources that you can point us towards to learn more about cultural intelligence and map our understanding? Yes, absolutely. We can ensure that we provide a couple of links for you around that, or if you want to provide your details or your email, we can provide something out to you, so that's fine. I really do think it's a real game changer. And the reason why I say that is when I've worked with leaders in a coaching capacity or in an open training environment, they've really started to do some more self-reflection than they've ever done before. And particularly, we ask them to rate their confidence on all of the diversity strands, and particularly race is the one that comes up predominantly lower than all of those. So, you know, they're acknowledging their fear and they're knowing that they need to fill that with some kind of development. So for me, that's been great. Okay, just going through some more questions. What sort of areas should we be asking our employer for greater transparency around to gain insight into where our attention is needed as a priority? So let me just read that one more time. I'm not sure if I'm completely getting that question 100%. So I don't know whether the person that wrote that, so sort of areas should we be asking our employer to get greater transparency and gain insight into where our attention is needing? I guess, yeah, I'm not completely clear on what that question is, and I don't want to answer it inappropriately. So whoever asked, it was an anonymous question. If you wouldn't mind just putting another point to that, that would be fantastic, and I'll definitely come back to that.
Joe, I've got a great question here. Can I read it out?
Yeah, please do.
Okay, what actionable tasks can we put forward for our CEO for there to be change?
For the CEO? Really going straight to the top. I mean, look, we speak to quite a lot of CEOs, and the obvious thing that happens from a CEO perspective is they pass it down to the HR professionals. So there's this, you know, yes, I really like that idea, or yes, I think that's really great, or I'm really behind this, but I'm going to give it to the HR team. So for me, the actions is about personal contribution. What are you personally going to do to contribute to this agenda? And I do actually coach a few CEOs personally at the moment, and their objectives and their actions are more around reverse mentoring. And some of those are partnered up. So there'll be a typical white senior male, and they'll partner perhaps with a young black female. And they found that relationship really difficult at first, if I'm honest, but really, really powerful now as they've worked through that. And some of those mentoring relationships are internal, and some they're going out external and mentoring someone outside of their own business. So I don't know whether that's the best example, but what I would say is from a CEO's perspective, whilst you want all these things to happen and you want to delegate them, you have to take some of that personal ownership. I don't know if your view on that, Ade.
Yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head. In order to get their buy-in, there has to be actions. And I think what Joe said just now is a great action. I'll speak just openly and transparently from my experience. You know, when you're in a position that I am in, which I'm really glad the position I am in, but when you're in this type of position, you are really hungry for change, and you buy into everything, you hold on to everything that people say they're going to do to bring change. So if you can make your CEOs accountable and have actions and put forward these suggestions and see that they are buying into it, then that would be a great idea. Relying on HR is not the best option, in my opinion. No offense to HR. So,
yeah. No, I mean, it's a collective responsibility, isn't it? Okay, another question. Is there an assumption that safe space needs to be delivered in solo organisations to engage the leadership? What happens if those affected are from different organisations but still need to have a need for safe space? Okay, so again, I'm hoping I'm going to answer this right. So are you suggesting, and I won't name the person, but whoever's put it through, that you'd like to do something a bit broader than just your own organisation? Because if that's the case, there are a number of organisations that have their own employee resource groups, so particularly their BAME group or their multicultural group, and they are looking to reach out to other organisations' employee resource groups and run safe space a bit more broader than just their own organisation. What that also means is they get to engage with different sets of leaders and also different sets of people who are diverse as well. So I don't know whether that answered your question, but if I interpret it correctly, hopefully it did. Okay, so we have just over 5 minutes. So I'm just going to find one more question perhaps before we have to come to a close. Okay. Oh, what is the difference between safe space and brave space? Ade, would you like to have a go at that one, and I'll give you my view after?
I would say safe space is, you know, sitting down, basically based on what we spoke about here today. Brave space is when you're actually actioning the points and making it happen. Brave space is when you're not afraid to ask uncomfortable questions and you're actually open to the answers. Brave space is also about acting upon the responses that you receive. Don't take anything that you hear back as an offense. It's not directed at you. A lot of what you're going to get back, maybe in these safe spaces, is literally just frustration. But brave space is being able to actually sit down, listen, and think of an action plan without receiving it as a point of offense.
Thank you, Ade. I mean, for me, the whole concept around safe space was much more focused on this need for psychological safety. And it came from a lot of our thinking and a lot of our work, but also our engagement, where people just felt that they was not safe to challenge their own organisation. They wasn't psychologically safe. They had lots of evidence of reprisals or career limiting effects since they raised that, or that they were labelled the troublemaker. So this is really a concept, safe space part, the difference between the two, is a concept to just say, do you know what? There is no judgment now. This is about us educating each other. And there is absolutely our commitment that this is a completely safe environment for you to have that. What I would hope, and I don't know whether all of my leadership would agree at Green Park, but what I would hope is we move into a situation where we don't need safe spaces. We just have safe conversations all the time. And that dialogue is much more flowing. We don't have to lock ourselves away and have these. But sadly, where we're at the moment, we do need to give people that assurance that they will be safe in sharing this information. And we know that through some of the work we do through engagement surveys, where people think that they are identified and they think that's had an effect on their own career. So this is really the concept. Okay, we literally have 2 minutes before we close. What I would say is we are going to get one of my colleagues to post in the link, in the chat, a link to us so you can access us. I'm also going to ask my team to jot down some of these questions. If it's at all possible for us to come back to some of these questions, I absolutely would like to do that, because I really want to make sure that there is no question that hasn't been answered. I just want to get a check to see whether you can still see my screen. If not, I'm going to have a go at sharing it again. Let's see if this is going to work. Hopefully you can. I just want to finalise by just 1 or 2 slides, if I may. So really enjoyed the opportunity to talk with you. I much prefer a two-way conversation, but this is what we needed to do. So I just want to finish up on this slide as a point of consideration or thought for you. So when we started Race Equality Matters, we asked our workshop participants to really think about what should it achieve. And these were the areas that they came up with. So for me, this is a really good foundation for you to base your objectives or your outcomes on. So really about having that amplification of voices. It's about removal of barriers. It's about enabling some accountability. So just 3 points there I've brought up. And I guess just a closing statement for me is that actions do speak so much more louder than words. And I'm afraid diverse employees of any diversity, but particularly race, have become ever so fatigued with sharing their views, being hopeful for change, yet seeing limited actions or a difference in behaviours. So my question I kind of pose to you as a close is, how will you ensure momentum post any safe space sessions? Because if no actions are taken off the back of this, you will get a disengagement from colleagues, and they just won't want to contribute to programmes or safe space activity anymore. So I think we are probably at our time now. So thank you very, very much for being on this webinar today. And we really do hope that we'll be able to come back and follow up. I do think there is my details there and there's our Green Park details. So if anybody wants to take a snap of that, then please do. But I think they are going to have some stuff posted in the chat as well. So thank you very much for your time today. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.